All right, I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fitter and Faster Live TV. I feel like I'm a station manager these days after the amount of live events we've done, but appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. We're going to break down the 100 freestyle today, and we have two very special guests with us. The first one, I personally coached for a while at Auburn University, and we attended the 2012 Olympics together, and she was a finalist in the 50 freestyle and swam a personal best time in the 100 freestyle. And her name is Arianna Vanderpool-Wallace. So welcome to the show, Arianna. There you are. How are you? You got your sound on? You there? Oh, I can't hear you. Why? Why can't I hear you? I heard you like 2 minutes ago. You there? I can't hear that. Let me try. Brent Hayden is our second guest. He is a three-time Olympian from Canada, and he is a bronze medalist in the 2012 100 freestyle. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you. Yes, I got you.
Okay, good.
I don't know why I couldn't hear Arianna. I could hear her a second ago. So maybe what I might do is try and refresh the room real quick. Hang on a second. All right, you guys turn your video back on. You there, Brent?
Oh, I'm here.
Perfect. All right, Arianna.
Uh-oh. What's going on?
We lost her video now as well. We've totally shut her out. Let me So Brent, talk to us. Where you at? What are you doing right now?
Well, I'm living in New Westminster, just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. I'm just living the quarantine isolation athlete life. So just doing as much training as I can, which is mostly out of the pool. So doing a lot of living room workouts at the park. But lately, my parents have opened up their tiny little backyard pool. So I've actually taken my stretch cords and started doing tethered swimming twice a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. So how's that going for you?
It's going pretty good. I mean, we do tethered swimming, 2 or 3 times a week already. It's good for overloading and working on developing your power. So it's, my workouts obviously are going to be much shorter. I'm not going to do 2 hours or even an hour and a half of that. Right now I'm between 30 to 45 minutes in the pool. But it's been good. I've been finding my feel for the water has not gone away, and it's just letting me keep training the muscles in a way that you can only train when you're actually in a pool.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what type of dry land are you doing?
I'm really mixing it up. Probably mostly body weight exercises. Just going through, just trying to create as much variety as I can, putting my body through different types of movements. So, trying to make sure that I don't get stuck doing, very two-dimensional movements, because obviously, as you know, water is very three-dimensional. Probably one of the most three-dimensional sports you have, or environments you could be in. So, and you're back. Yay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes, it worked. So just trying to keep it going. That way, I got myself a new speed skipping rope. So that's one way I'm doing keeping up the cardio. I tried running, but I don't know if it's I'm old or whatever, but my knees don't like the impact of the run at all. So yeah, so I'm doing skipping ropes for that. But I got a few weights that I borrowed from my gym that I have a membership at.
Mm-hmm.
So I have those, but I got to be careful with the neighbors downstairs that I'm not banging weights on the floor. So I've recently taken to doing workouts in the parkade, which I posted a video of that on my Instagram recently.
Good idea. Good idea. What is your Instagram so people can follow you?
Yeah, it's the Brent Hayden. So TheBrentHayden.
Okay, the Brent Hayden. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. We've got Arianna back. Arianna's a 3-time Olympian from the Bahamas. So welcome, Arianna.
Thanks. Thank you. Happy to be back.
Yes. Now, what are you up to? Where are you?
I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I currently work for Arianna swimwear company, so been busy doing that stuff. Yeah, like Brett's shirt. Busy working in the Southeast, trying to get people into our product, which is exciting. I've taken up running outside, which I've never done in my entire life, and I'm starting to like it. I see why people like it. So this morning I ran about 5 miles, but I'm usually between like 5 to 8 miles. So having fun with that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you've got running in your blood, whether you like it or not, because when we went to the Olympics in 2012 together, the Bahamas national team at the Olympics, I think there was 27 athletes, something like that, and there was 26 track athletes and 1 swimmer. So there's definitely some track in your blood somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, listen, we're going to get talking about the 100 freestyle today because it's an event that a lot of people swim and are very interested in, and you guys have done a great job with it. Arianna, your best time is long course 53.7, is it?
Yes.
And then short course yards is 46.8?
46.6.
46.6, that's right. That's right. And then Brent, where are you at with the best times?
I mean, all my best times were from the bodysuit days. Man, those suits were fast.
They were.
It was 47, 27, and the 100 free long course. I don't remember anything else.
47, yes. Okay, well, we're going to get back to 47 here this year, so don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was the first one ever under 48 when they banned those bodysuits. So that's a stat that I can hang on to.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
Where'd you do that swim at?
That was at the Commonwealth Games in Delhi back in 2010.
Oh, perfect. Oh, awesome, man. Awesome. All right, we're going to get into some talking about the 100 free. I'm going to start, I think, with Arianna, and then we'll move on to Brent's presentation. Each one of these guys has something a little bit different to say, and we'll use these as talking points. But I asked Arianna to write down some things maybe from when she was in high school, and then things that she learned and practiced while she was in college. So we'll have a look at this real quick. Okay. Let's look at this. Where is it? There. Okay. Why won't that work? There it is. That's why it won't work. I kept clicking off it for some reason. Okay, so breaking down the 100 free. Added some photos of when you were competing in here, Arianna, and I like these photos a lot because you have to be in a certain mental and physical state to be at your best when you perform. And a couple of these photos here really illustrate what you like to do behind the block right before you swim at your best. So talk us through the one where you've got your hands on your hips behind the blocks. What are you doing in that photo?
One of the most important things I probably ever learned in swimming is that most of a race, especially as a sprinter, is confidence. Once you get behind the blocks, you've done all the work that you need to do. So behind the blocks, as long as you're confident in what you can do, that's when you're going to swim fast. So that was kind of my power pose, as it was phrased. And that's when I felt like I was at my strongest. So my hands on my hips, staring straight at the pool. I think it evolved eventually through my swimming career to staring at whoever was next to me. But that's kind of where that comes from.
And as you're staring down the pool, what are you thinking right there?
Not really a whole lot. I'm trying to just like get my mind to relax. Before a race, the last thing you want to do is like skyrocket your heart rate, because that's going to add extra tension that you don't need in your body. So I'm usually had just listened to like a rap song standing behind the block. So I'm probably re-singing whatever song was last playing.
Okay, nice. Now, the one down here where you're spitting some water into the air, what was that all about?
I think I kind of copied that from Caesar maybe, or somebody. And it just kind of became part of every swimmer has like their superstition. So right before a race, I splash myself with water, get some in my mouth and spray it out. And that was part of my like, now I know I'm ready to go. That's game on. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of other photos here as well. The one where you're sitting on the block right before you jump in for practice, looks like you're doing a little bit of visualization. Is that something that you would do before practice?
Yeah, that was actually when we were in London, or at our training camp right before London. As you can see, there was nobody else in the pool. So I think that was like right during that last part of training. So I was tapering pretty well there. And so I think that day we were doing a race pace for 100 freestyle, most likely. And so I was trying to just get into the vibe of what I wanted to do, what tempos and speeds I wanted to hit going into that practice.
Okay. And then down the bottom, you're lifting some weights. We have the question in terms of when should swimmers start weight training? When did you actually start really lifting weights?
I started lifting lighter weights and doing a lot of like med ball, body weight, additional stuff my senior year in high school. And then going into freshman year of high school, that's when I started lifting really heavy. Once I got to Auburn, that's when I really started to lift up heavy weights and understand that that stuff was like super helpful for me. I'm a short sprinter. I'm 5'6". I'm competing against girls that are usually around 6 feet tall. So my power needed to be higher than, or my power output needed to be higher than what my height was, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. All right. Let's get into the first slide here where you talk about just the 100 freestyle in particular. So talk us through some of these talking points, and maybe Brent, you might be able to jump in once Arianna starts on some of these too. So in high school, in particular, Arianna, what were the things that you were working on in your 100 freestyle?
So these are kind of the things that I found were most helpful in working on my 100 freestyle during high school. Finding your racing pace. Everybody kind of has an idea that the 100 freestyle short course especially is just an all-out brawl. I think that's kind of the worst thing that you can do for 100 freestyle. If you try to go out a little bit too hard, you're going to end up feeling that in the second 25 or the third 25, fourth 25. So finding that racing pace where you feel comfortable at and you can sustain it for the entire 100. And then I kind of, on the next slide, I go into more of like changing that once you get into college, but really just finding a pace that you're comfortable at sustaining for an entire 100. And then basically what I mean by increasing your base pace is, so this is helpful not just for the 100 freestyle, but 200 freestyle, 400 freestyle, all the way up. When you can increase that base pace, what you're capable of doing, that racing pace only continues to increase. Whenever you're capable of holding a base speed, you're able to increase your race pace along with that. So I remember doing sets that I hated at the time, but I understand why they were important. And it's like 100 freestyles, best average. Those are where you can really increase and find your power in doing those and your strength. And that's when you can kind of, when you're behind the blocks, you can think back to saying, I was able to hold 10 100s freestyle at this time. Why can't I go what my race goal is? So stuff like that, increasing that stuff. Breathing pattern is super important, especially what I think I see a lot of times when people are trying to go faster in 100 freestyle. The first thing they want to do is hold their breath. That's the worst thing that you can do. So making sure that you have a breathing pattern that you and your coach come up with to understand when you're going to be at your best, at what breathing pattern, depending on your stroke and all of that stuff. So you don't want to go out that first 25 without having taken a breath. That's going to make for a very painful second 25, third 25. That last 25 is going to be absolute death. So just making sure that you're hitting on those things. And then that's also where being comfortable with being uncomfortable comes in. That 100 freestyle is going to be painful. It's going to hurt. So understanding that no matter how much you train and how hard you go, the 100 freestyle is still going to be an uncomfortable event. So just training to get to that point where you're comfortable in that uncomfortable position. And then the final point that I thought was important was get better at the details, especially when you're a sprint freestyler, sprint butterfly, or sprint backstroke, sprint breaststroke. Those details are what makes the biggest difference. When you're racing to change your time by hundredths of a second, tenths of a second, it's the starts and the turns that are going to really make that difference. Getting more powerful off your start, getting more powerful off your turns. Those things are super important. The kids.
All right. Yeah. That's my reality right now, everybody.
Working from home.
Yeah. So the details. So, well, that's good. I appreciate that. Brent, what could you add? What was the difference between you in high school as opposed to you being a professional swimmer? Can you remember back to when you were in high school?
Yeah, well, I was a summer league swimmer until going into grade 11. So I was a late bloomer, I guess you could say. Because in summer club, the longest event we had was the 200 IM, and other than the IM, that was the only event that was actually 200. So every other stroke race was 100 meters or 50 meters. So you can definitely understand why why I'm a sprinter rather than a distance swimmer.
Yeah.
I think for me, I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying. Like, especially when you're trying to find your increasing your base pace, but a lot of the times, you also don't know how good you're going to be unless you're willing to push yourself out of that comfort zone and just get up on the blocks and be like, you know what, I might not be fit enough to hold this pace, but I gotta know what that feels like to be at that pace, and then work on the fitness to be able to maintain it. So that's why it's so important to get up into racing modes where you can get up and actually push your comfort zone and figure out exactly what kind of pace can you hold, because doing lots of 100 averages and that are definitely super important, but there's still something where you still got to get up on the blocks and almost like train that 100 as well and use that as a training opportunity. Breathing pattern, again, it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody has a slightly different physiological makeup. I know for my first 25 meters, I think I might do one breath. I typically will go for about 8 strokes to 11 strokes, no breath at all, just because I'm trying to just use that as a way to build momentum and just to get into the race pace and my personal anaerobic threshold. Because when I swim a 50 free, I do that without a breath at all, like most top 50 freestylers do. So I use that to my advantage in the 100 and try to at least for me to at least go that first 25 or so without that breath.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, but the details though, it's tough because again, this is where your training comes into play, when you got that lactic acid that's building up inside you, and you got all these neurological responses trying to tell you to take a breath, right? Not to do the number of dolphin kicks you want to do to get under that wave and have a good solid breakout and get back onto your stroke. You have to train your neurological response to realize that you don't need a breath right now. You might want one, but you don't actually need it. So getting to that point where you can kind of turn off the pain. And now don't think I'm saying never breathe, because obviously if you need to breathe, you breathe. I hate hypoxic training. I'm probably the worst person on the team for that. I can never do a 20, if we're doing sets of 25s underwaters, I'll do the first one underwater, and then after that I'm popping up at the flags every single time. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Which that might surprise some people, but if you obviously need to take a breath, do, but you can go a little bit longer than what your body is telling you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Let's have a look at the next slide, Arianna, where you went from, who was your coach in high school, by the way?
That's a great question. I had 3. So Sergio Lopez was my senior year. The year before that, it was Rick Bishop, who's now at Michigan. And then the year before that was Jeff Papel, who's now at Florida. So all coaches that ended up are now coaching high-end Division I colleges. I had the ability to swim under in high school. So
you had a terrible upbringing then. So
I know, it was the worst.
So 3 amazing coaches. That's incredible. But you did save the best coach for college, so I'm glad.
I did.
So in college, what were some of the things that we worked on together, Arianna? I'm glad you remembered these things. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So one of the biggest things that I think Brent and I worked on in my 100 freestyle, I know that we worked on because I hated those sets, were front end and back end speeds. I am this kind of sprinter where I'm not super fast on the front end, but I also am not great on the back end. So working both sides of that were super important for me, because I can go out really fast, but then I'm not going to be able to come home. or I can not go out fast and then I'm still not going to make up that time in my back end. So like making those two meet in the middle and really mesh together was super important for me. And kind of like you were saying, Brent, like it is super important to feel that pain and to get to kind of push that limit. So that's where that front end and back end speed comes in. We would do a lot of sets where.
Let me just clarify in terms of front end and back end. You're talking about the first 50 and the second 50.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah. Yes. So we would do a lot of sets where it was like all out 25, you get 20 seconds to rest, and then you want to do a back end 75 as fast as you can to really push that pain and to make it feel like you're doing a full 100, but you're not actually doing the full 100, and really push that last 50 to as hard as you can go. Because that's for most, from what I've experienced, for most sprinters, that last 15 meters or yards is probably the hardest part of the race. So if you're able to spend that time working on that part of the race, it's tantamount to like having an amazing 100 freestyle.
Yeah. Okay. And then the stroke count and kick count, what does that mean?
So I think, Brent, you kind of touched on this a little bit, and you might touch on it later as well, but in the 100 freestyle, especially short course, because you have so many turns, you have to make sure that you're getting the right amount of stroke counts in to hit that wall at a great speed and to come off with a great kick count where you're going to get under those waves and you're going to come up fast. You don't want to be underwater for too long and you're going to lose your momentum. You also don't want to be underwater for too short and you're hitting the wave of everybody that's coming into the wall. So it's important to know your boundaries and figure out where you can stay underwater and not lose speed, but you're also getting up and getting to stroke count as quick as possible. And with stroke count in the 100 freestyle, touching on a lot of stuff that we did in college was tempo work. So finding out what your tempo is. So you want your right arm to hit the water every 1.1 seconds or whatever your tempo is, and being able to hold that over time.
So tempo is just basically how fast you're moving your arms, and then you have to consider your stroke length as well. How long is your stroke? Because I can move my arms really fast if my stroke is really short, but I want to be able to maintain my stroke length so that I'm getting the right amount of catch and pull and extension all the way back. So the balance between the stroke length and the tempo of the stroke, how fast you're actually spinning your arms, is important too, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I meant on the next point, fine-tuning your stroke under tension. That's what we did in college was a lot of power racks, so weighted racks. You put a belt around your waist and you're pulling more weight than what your body weight is, and finding out how to put your tempo in, but also being able to move that weight. So you find that you're faster and stronger if you're having a longer stroke rate, but able to keep that tempo. So we would get to points where we were trying to carry the weight, but also hit that 100 freestyle tempo. And so you find that if you just keep doing this, you're not going to move very far or very fast. But if you're able to go longer and keep that tempo, that's when you get stronger and better at racing.
Nice.
And then again, details always important. They will never leave you. They were the death of me. They should be the death of everybody. You need to do every swimmer's like, oh, I want to work on starts and turns today, but your entire practice is starts and turns. You have that opportunity to practice your turns all day. The better you get at actually having a great turn, the more important it is in your race, because when you're in your race, you're tired, you're not thinking about those details. So if you're able to sustain that great detailed technique all through an entire practice, that's when it's important.
Yeah, so on that, Brent, would you agree with that? She's talking about every turn she made, whether it was fast or slow, was an important turn to her. It was something that she was focused on every time she came to the wall. Is that something that you do as well?
Absolutely. Like whenever I've run clinics or gone in to do any kind of coaching sessions, like it's crazy. Like one thing I ask the swimmers is, hey, how often do you guys get to work on turns? They're like, oh, once a week, for 15 minutes, like you get those kind of answers. And I'm like, no, you guys work on your turns every single flip turn, right? Every single time you go to the wall is an opportunity to fine tune your details. So even in warm up, like your very first flip turn is probably one of the most important ones to go in and start off the practice with a great turn and then try to maintain having good turns all the way through your practice. So That way, when you're fresh, you got no excuses to be doing, a poor turn. And then as you get through the workout and lactic acid starts kicking in, you start getting fatigued. You have a baseline of what your perfect turn should be, and then you can still try to hit that every single flip turn, right? And especially we can go back to my summer club days. Like I was not a fast swimmer when I was young, and a lot of the times I had to swim with swimmers who were older than me because we had a 6-lane pool and the club could only rent 2 lanes, so you'll have like 10 kids in each lane while the rest of the pool is open for rec swimming, and they got music playing and kids on the ropes and stuff. Like it's like the most distracting environment ever, which was terrible for me.
Sounds like my house.
Oh. And so I couldn't change my fitness level in a matter of days, right? And one of the things that a lot of the bigger swimmers would do is that every time they'd lap you, they'd yank on your leg and pull you backwards, and the water goes shooting up your nose. And so you try to figure out ways that I can't change my fitness level, but what are the things I can work on so that I stop getting lapped and stop having my leg pulled. And one of those places, it was making sure my flip turns were perfect every single time, really utilizing my streamline, getting past the flags every single push, which for a 9-year-old kid is a lot harder to do, and things like that. And then that's where it comes into perfecting your stroke and all the other details that go along with it. So I learned really early that the importance of technique, because I was in situations where I was stuck in lane with swimmers who were better than me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was going to say that to you, Arianna. How tall were you when you came into college? So at the end of high school, what was your height?
5'6". I've been 5'6" my entire life, and it sucks.
Well, not when you were 6 years old, but
no, obviously not.
But by the time you got to college, you were at your max height. So when you entered college, what was your best time in the 100 free?
100-yard free. I think it was like a 50 point high or 51 mid, somewhere between there.
Yeah, I thought you were at 51 low, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So let's say your best time was 51.2 seconds entering college. So at the end of high school, at the end of college, you went 46.6. So you dropped 5 seconds, and that wasn't because you got taller, as you said. You didn't go from 5'6" to 6'5". I mean, you stayed at 5'6". So what you did is you learned better technique. You improve your strength. You improve your mental capacity in terms of how you approach your swimming. So all those things you can improve without getting any bigger, and that's the important message, I think, for everybody listening at home, is you can improve a great deal through technique and through training if you're doing the right things. So that's what we're trying to talk to you guys about today. So we're going to go on to Brent's presentation. We'll have a look at that real quick. Again, these are just some short bullet points that you guys can write down. So
I thought I'd share a couple of my favorite sets.
Okay.
Because I hate long sets. Obviously you need to do those those 100 best averages and things like that. But I love short, really hard sets where because for me, that's just the kind of workout my brain likes. I love those really short, engaged, just hammer it out as hard as you can kind of sets. So the first one is kind of a variation of a set that I used to do in my first life. And something I talk about, my first career from 2002 to 2012 was like my first life. And now I'm out of retired. I'm kind of in my second life of swimming. So doing 25 sprints, especially rounds of them, was a super common one. Because one of the things that we would always aim for was, as the lactic acid builds up and as the fatigue starts to set in, trying to figure out ways to maintain the same time, right? So as you feel like you've got less to give, being able to at least maintain the times that you're doing, and even figure out ways to go even faster was super important. So I used to do these without any equipment at all, and a lot of times another way of doing this would be like a pyramid, right? Where you're first round is 2, and then 100 easy, then 4 25s, 100 easy, 6 25s, 8 25s, 6 25s, 4 25s, 2 25s, right? So there's a lot of different ways you could do this, and by the time I get to the last 2, I'm trying to do those as fast as my fastest ones were. So for me, my goal is always to do my 25 meters from a push under 11 seconds. That's from feet leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could do that, then I knew I was doing good. Now, what we're doing now is starting off with fins and paddles. So you're actually starting faster than what you would normally go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're trying to train that speed, right? Because especially when the water's flowing over you faster, like you got to, there's a lot of, the water feels different. You got to hold the water a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus when you're swimming, slower. So, like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have done like tons of, stretch cord work where you go in the opposite direction and swim with the cord, right? Similar to that. But anyways, then you slowly take off the equipment. So fins and paddles first around 100 easy, then it's just fins, 100 easy, and then you go with just no equipment. Again, just trying to keep that stroke rate up, as much as you can. Just trying to keep that sort of that racing speed as high as you can as well. I prefer to do these on 60 seconds with with the good rest in between, because the point is to train the race pace as much as you can, and you can always make it harder by putting it on less rest. So you're letting that lactic acid build up more, or you're letting your ATP cycle maybe not cycle in and out nearly as much.
Recover.
You're right. And then the other one, this was a new one for me that I started doing. I think the first time I did this was at our Maui training camp earlier this year. We go 3 to 5 rounds. I said 3 to 5 because the set was 5, but me being the old guy fresh out of retirement, I only had to do 3. So I don't want, if you can do 5, right? That's why I still want to make sure everybody else can keep doing it. I'm still working on some fitness things. But you dive to 15 meters, race pace to on 30 seconds. Then it's 3 times 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, a vertical dolphin kick, and you're going hard the whole time, right? This isn't easy, or it's like maybe just a hair off your max. Then it's 3 times 15 meters in and out on your turn. So you got to maintain that good dolphin kick underwater, which now that you've got that lactic acid built up in your legs, it's not easy to do.
Yeah.
And then you just finish with a hard 15-meter sprint to the finish with breath control, right? So if you can do it with no breath, great. If you need to take one, knowing when to take it, because the last thing you want to be training is your body to take a breath when you got 2 strokes left, right? Yeah. So making sure you do it, outside the flags first, or whatever strategy you and your coach come up with. So I think those are just 2 great workouts that people can start adding into their training. And again, like, these aren't set in stone. Like, these are just like guidelines or templates that you can feel free to change pace times on to make them easier, make them lighter. Changing the order of the equipment for the 3 times 825, maybe start off no equipment and then build the equipment on, right? Like, so it's totally like 2 simple steps where you can just totally like have fun with it and just kind of like just mix things up. And like I said, the thing that I like about them is that they're short, they're hard, and they're super engaging for the brain. Like, there's no time for your brain to turn off and just kind of like swim through the meters in these. Like, you're on it the whole time.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to come back to the presentation in a sec, but that's really good information there, and I think that's really important. And Arianna, you can attest to this. This is same things we did, basically. It's not really what you do. Like, you wrote some workouts there, which I think are great guidelines, but as you said, you can mix and match, you can add things, you can take things away. But really the important message there is that you're training under fatigue, because you want to get up to speed in your 100, and you want to be able to maintain that speed, and you're going to fatigue really, really fast if you haven't trained your body under fatigue. And that's a lot of what we did at Auburn, right, Arianna?
Mm-hmm. And that second set, well, both sets is something very similar to what we did, but that second set is one of the best sets I think you can do, especially for a 100 freestyler, because it's one of those sets where you look at it and you're like, that doesn't seem so hard, and then you get into it and you're like, oh wow, this is like death. And but when you get done and you get finished with that second set, you realize that's that last 15-meter sprint to the wall is that's what I'm talking about, like building that back end speed. Like, that's going to be painful on round 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter. Like, it's going to hurt. And that's that's where you can stand behind the block and be confident and know I have that last 15 meters because I was able to finish it strong during that set.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, yeah, like you're absolutely right. Like, it looks easy on paper because, like, it was like just a bunch of 15-meter sprints. Like, 15 meters is super easy. But thinking back, I think my coach Tom actually wrote out 5 rounds, and then I think I had to tell him after 3, I'm like, I'm done. Like, I'm out. Like, I can't do anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm working up to those 5 rounds. So like that is it's not easy to do if you are doing it with the intention to get better, right? Because like I've seen people say things like sets like doing 650s on 6 minutes and saying like, oh, that's easy, like 6 minutes to do a 50 is like, but if you're doing that set with the intention of what you need to be doing, man, you can make any, like, that's what makes the difference between a set being hard and easy. It's not necessarily how it's written, it's the intention you put into it.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, making sure that each one of those points in that set is taken care of and you're taking care of each one of them. That's what makes that set hard. It's not, you can probably dive in, flop and do 30 seconds, then barely vertical kick, and then it's not hard. But if you make each intention to build that part of the race, those are hard sets. And those were like my favorite sets because those are the things I can put in my back pocket and be like, okay, I know I'm stronger now because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think sometimes when you're in a program, it's just about survival. And when you get to a point where you want to get really good at the details and better at your 100 freestyle, it's not about survival. It's about giving the maximum effort you can give per repetition. It's a max repetition every time you do something, and that's how you get better over time, is that you're giving your max effort time and time again in very short doses, but then you regroup and you give your max effort again, then you regroup, you give your max effort again. That's how you make the biggest improvements in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absolutely. Your coach isn't trying to kill you. They're trying to make you stronger. And like you were saying, Brent, like you got to 3 rounds and you're like, I cannot. And that's when a coach can come in and say, yep, you're right. Like you've given it your all. We're not going to get anything out of these last 2 rounds. So for most people, like your coach knows what you're doing. They know what they're doing, and they're going to make sure to protect you when they need to. But most of the time, there's going to be times where you're going to do rounds 4 and 5 and feel like it's the worst thing of your life, but you need to do those extra 2 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's have a look at this next slide real quick. All right, Brent, talk us through this.
So this is me kind of like this is I would say this is a very simplified breakdown of what the 100-meter is like when the actual race. And it was crazy, like actually, like just the timing of this was like, I actually had a message this morning from a doctor named Greg Wells, and hope you're watching, Greg. I sent him a message like 15 minutes before this thing started saying, hey, you gotta get on here. He sent me a video of him in London with CTV, and he actually was on air doing a breakdown of my 100-meter freestyle, but also more specifically comparing the semifinal from the final. So the next slides after this, I'm going to actually break those down and actually use some of the points that he actually used, and it was just like crazy timing. But I mean, anyways, we can just run through this quickly. I mean, I'm just like a professor reading from the textbook here now. But like 0 to 20 meters, right? It's like you got to get out to clear water and with controlled speed, because the last thing you want is to get stuck behind somebody and just like eating their waves, right? You almost feel like you're swimming uphill. Now, this is going to be challenging because obviously everybody's got their own different race strategies, and like you don't want to be burning your everything on the the front end speed, kind of like alluding to what we talked about earlier. But you got to find the easiest way that you can get out in front of the wave, so that way you're not fighting against the currents, right? And one of the ways that I do this is making sure that no breath, especially on the breakout. Like if you're doing 100-meter free and you break out on the first stroke, like, man, like you're you're not paying attention to the details, right?
You just stop dead. It's like,
yeah, you literally stop. You do stop dead, and then it actually takes more energy to build up the speed that you lost again. So you got to make sure that you're actually carrying the momentum from the block to your underwaters, to the breakout, to the 20 or 25 meters, right? So it's not about diving in, kicking, getting to the surface, and then trying to build up your speed, right? The fastest swimmers don't necessarily speed up. They maintain their speed from the block.
Yeah.
Right. So getting out to clear water with controlled speed, no breathing, right? And then carry that speed to the turn. I'll actually build up a little bit into the turn, just so that way I can kind of build up a little bit more momentum. And I think in London, after I took my first breath, which was like at least 8 strokes, I think I breathed 6, and then I breathed 4, and then after that I was breathing every 2, then into the flip turn, because again, like, you know, your muscles need oxygen. Once you've gone past that anaerobic threshold, like, you got to get oxygen to your muscles, or else they're going to stop working, right? So, you know, when you're working at, like, you know, at that level, like, you got to get oxygen into your bloodstream, feeding your muscles. Otherwise, like, you're just not going to be able to maintain at the level you want to, especially on stroke rate, right? On the 50 to 70 meters, like, you got to get under that wave. In the next slides, you're going to see the difference between my semifinal in London versus the final. I actually, this kind of sparked a memory. It was my first World Championships, so we're going back to 2003. Okay, and it was Barcelona.
No one on this webcast was born back then, Brent.
Right. Well, maybe for the listeners. So 2003 was my first World Champs, and I remember being in the semifinal, and I took one, like, I wasn't on I didn't have like a stroke count or a breathing pattern developed yet. I kind of just went in there and just was like, you know, praying everything would just work out well. And, you know, that's what happens when you don't have a plan, right? And everything falls apart. And I took a breath on my last stroke. And one of my rules, I didn't write it down here, but one of my rules is don't take a breath in the last 3 strokes into the turn. And that's not because I want to say you don't need to get some air for your underwater kick, but it's because when you're sprinting and you take your eyes off the bottom of the pool where the tee is, and your eyes glance to the side, even just for that split moment, you actually often don't realize how much distance you actually covered, and how many times you come back out of that breath, come back where your eyes come to center, and all of a sudden you're too close to the wall.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think we've all probably been there. So I took that last breath. I came back, realized I was pretty much like going to face plant into the wall, did a quick little turn, pushed off, and I just got rocked by that incoming wave, because, like, I actually, I choked on water because I didn't have anyways, yeah, choked on some water on that breath, pushed off, came up early to get that breath, and I just got rocked by that wave, and it felt like I was starting from like a dead stop, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, never again. I'm never going to make that mistake again. Well, semifinal in London, I hit that wave again. So I'll get into that after.
Picture of that, I think.
Yeah, I got pictures of it. But then after the breakout, though, like, that's when the lactic acid really starts to burn. And this is something that George Bovell calls it the hammer of justice. He just posted an article about it recently, when he had one of his teammates actually drew like a Thor's hammer with some lightning bolts on the inside of his bicep, and then he went and won the bronze medal in Athens. But it's that moment where the lactic acid is like totally like building up in you, and like, you've got a decision you need to make, right? And for me in London, especially in the final, I actually had this moment where I kind of realized that this is the last time I'm probably ever going to swim a 100-meter freestyle ever, because I'd already had the idea that, or the thought that I was probably going to retire after London. And so when that lactic acid was building up inside me, like, that was the thought that I had, was that this is going to be the last time ever. And so, like, I just didn't care how much pain that was coming my way. I knew I was going to do whatever I could to just kind of swim through it. But Georgie has something that's kind of interesting, where at that moment when you're making a decision, right, to actually press the gas a bit and make the guys next to you, or make the girls next to you, think that you have a fresh tank still left in you.
Yeah.
to kind of make them go, oh man, like they're fresh, man. They got energy left to go. Look at them. It's like, and it might even only be for like 2 or 3 strokes that you just kind of just push it just a little bit, just to make them, like almost like question whether or not they're going to try to stay with you. But often that little lapse of judgment that you've kind of thrown over into their lane is enough to make them break just enough that you can out touch them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's I won the bronze medal by 2/100th of a second, right? So if I didn't make that decision there to go, there's a good chance I probably wasn't going to be on the podium. And you just never know. Like maybe that actually broke the guys that were next to me a little bit. Like I don't know. That wasn't my intention, but it's a decision that every swimmer is going to have to make when they're feeling that lactic acid. Are you going to just ride it out and just pray that the wall comes sooner rather than later so the pain can go away? Or are you going to dig in and get your hand on the wall and make these other guys think that you've got a little bit more to give so they can actually back off a little bit, right? Oh, Brett, have you ever been in a situation like that where you felt like somebody next to you had a fresh tank?
Only for about 10 years of my career, yeah. Every time I swam the 100, I had a decision to make. A couple of times I was swimming next to you, actually. I was trying to make that decision.
Oh, nice.
We had some good swims against each other in the past, but I like the last part here where you basically say like head down into the finish and just get your hand on the wall there. I like that.
Yeah. So like just running through the tips here. So like obviously like your streamline can always be tighter, especially when you're sprinting and you're putting a lot of power into your dolphin kick. It can be really easy to kind of take a position of power through your arms, which might make your arms less tight than they actually could be, because you might be more focusing on generating power from your core, that you're not quite focused on what your arms are doing. So always pulling your arms a little bit tighter. So like one little tip for the people watching today is, hook your thumb over top of your hand and actually use that to pull your arms even tighter, right? There's the minimum 4 dolphin kicks off the dive and the turn, right? Because especially to get under that wave, if you've got an amazing underwater kick, definitely like do more, like push it to 50 meters if that's your strength. But if you're like me, like I don't have a great underwater, just knowing how far you need to go to get under that wave and then come up and then carry on with the part that you're the strongest at. Carrying the momentum through the turn. So as I mentioned, building up into that turn and carrying the speed. A lot of swimmers, I think, will use that turn as almost like a stop, turn, and go again, almost like they're breaking the lengths into 2 separate lengths. I try to think of them as one continuous loop rather than 2 separate lengths, right? And the turn is more kind of like almost like a point of acceleration, so to speak. I kind of grew up kind of I was into space and things like that. Like I was, I had space wallpaper and things like that. And I always thought of how the astronauts used the gravity of the moon to slingshot them back around to get free trajectory back to Earth without having to burn any fuel, right? So I mean, if you watch Apollo 13, that's a great example. So I always kind of use that in my head as a turn, as a way to carry the speed and then use the gravity, which is basically the push of the wall, the physical object, to then accelerate from. So and then carrying that momentum through, and then obviously breathing every 2 on the last length, except for the 50 meters, keep that oxygen flowing into your muscles, and then finish on your side, because as you'll see in the next slide, you'll see like what that actually looks like and what it also doesn't look like when you fail to do that.
All right, let's check that out then. So what do we got here? This is a 100-meter freestyle from London where you actually took the bronze medal. This is the first 20 meters.
Yeah, so I didn't have a good start. And I didn't have a very good breakout either. And you could just see that just from those 2 small things. Like I was buried way deep in the pack there. So I had to deal with a lot of, I would call it dirty water. So I wasn't able to get a clean hold of water on my hand and forearm to pull and I felt like I was kind of swimming slightly uphill. Whereas in the final, and it looks like I shifted my arrow a bit somewhere when I was editing that. So I'm actually the ball guy on the bottom there. I should have dropped that arrow down a little bit lower. But you can see that I've got like perfectly clear water for my hand to enter in and to get a good hold on some good clean water to keep powering through. And like I'm not fighting against any currents there at all. So that's the difference between getting ahead of the pack so you can carry some free speed versus getting behind the pack a little bit and having to fight against the current and pulling at some dirty water.
Okay, all right. Let's have a look at this. 50 to 70 minutes. This is coming off the wall.
Yeah. So in the semifinal, you can actually see, if you follow the darker blue line, you can actually see how it kind of comes down under my chin, and then it kind of comes up and over my head. So that's the wave. And if you watch the video of this, you'll actually see the moment where that wave is coming and it actually hits my head. And so like it really feels like you're hitting a wall, and then it takes more energy to build your momentum back up, because you got to do like 2 to 3 faster strokes just to get back up onto your pace again. Now, if you think of I like to think of a momentum like basically like a big concrete ball, and you're trying to push it across the field, right? Well, as long as you keep that ball rolling, it takes less energy to give it little pushes just to keep it going. But once it stops, right, the amount of energy you're going to have to put in behind that big weight to get it going again is going to be much harder. So it's easier to maintain momentum than it is to build it up. Versus in the final, broke out in perfectly clear water. Actually came out on top of the water a little bit. I would say my head position is a little bit too high.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's my analysis of that. Actually looking back at a lot of my old races, I think that was a mistake I was making. I was looking forward a little bit too much. So I can look back at this race and still see areas where I can see improvement, and that's definitely one of them. But you can still get the point that I got past that wave. Like there's no wave near me in this picture. Like it's way past me. Like that's all clear water. So I'm able to come off that wall and carry that speed and get back onto my stroke rate way more efficiently.
Yeah, and Arianna, this is really relates well to short course swimming too, right?
Yeah, for sure. That all of that information, when you're coming off the wall in the 100 freestyle, each of those 3 walls that you have to come off of, that's super important to find that clear water and get under that wave, because especially for when you're watching the 100 freestyle at the NCAA level, you will see that huge tidal wave come in behind the swimmers. And as soon as they flip, if you pop up, you're going to stop dead in your tracks. And like you were saying, Brent, you're completely right. Like you have to take those 2 to 3 extra strokes to kind of power yourself through that. And not only are you losing that energy, but it's also like a mental game that you have to play, because you feel that. So you have to like regroup mentally in the span of like a tenth of a second to be like, oh yeah, okay, I've got to push through that. So just clearing that wave just alleviates a lot of mental and physical energy that you would waste.
Yeah, like when I hit the wave in the semifinal, it's almost like you could almost see your chances for making the Olympic final just get like slashed down into like the tiniest of chances, right? Like you that actually, so like the wave might hit you, but I think like the mental wave that hits you even harder. And then the opposite actually happens when you actually do hit that clean breakout into that clean water. You almost see like your chances in this case, like my chances of winning the medal became bigger. And so that was even super motivating. It's like, okay, I just had a great turn, and like I got to take advantage of this, and like I got to keep this going, right? So so doing those things, like it totally can affect your mental game for the rest of the race.
Yeah.
Let's
have a look at this then. So into the finish here, Brent.
Yeah, so you can see in the semifinal, like I'm almost looking at the wall, and my body is totally flat. I'm hitting the wall in like this, right? And then in the final, I'm completely on my side. I actually like kind of had this vision in my head that I'm reaching for the wall, and like I'm going to break my fingers because I'm going to stretch them out so far. But I was like, I just didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that I just get my hands on the wall. But when you get onto your side, it actually lengthens your reach quite significantly. So you can actually beat swimmers if you're head to head, and say like you've even got the same arm span, right? If you just go on your side, you your reach longer than the swimmer that stays on their front, and you can actually touch them just by doing that one little thing. Or even if you're slightly behind, you can actually still out touch them with that movement. So a lot of races are can be won or lost with just that one little detail.
And that's like that's easy energy for you too. It's not like an extra expended energy to just like, because your body's already right. It's your body's already moving in that direction.
Yeah.
So just letting your body lengthen to that side is.
Arianna, that would have been important for you too.
Yeah, especially because I'm so short.
Yeah. What was the height of the girls? The average height of the girls that you were racing in the Olympics, Arianna?
Yeah, I mean, I remember walking out for the final and seeing girls that are 6 feet tall and 5'6". That's 6 inches taller than I am. So like that stuff like that, that's giving me that extra height is stuff that I need to take. All of those little small things, just that extra reach into the wall is a huge difference. Yeah. Well, it's a difference sometimes between being an Olympic medalist, Brent, and not being, So it's really, really good. Yeah.
I would say like, and this takes a lot of experience, like to be able to make that as many mistakes as I did in a semifinal, and then coming back into the final and being able to fix them, because like, there are so many things that you need to be able to do naturally, and that comes from training and getting your routines in, and getting that feel of getting like taking the same number of strokes and all that other stuff that basically just becomes muscle memory. Like, but there are times where you need to make some changes in the race. So while all that lactic acid is burning, like you're also thinking a lot as well, and it's like you want to get to the point where you can think about as few things as possible, but I think my experience goes, I mean, this was my third Olympics and it was my only medal. But my experiences in the previous 2 Olympics where, I didn't even make the final, led to me being able to make those adjustments in the race as I was going.
Yeah, sure. All right, I've written a couple of workouts here that I know everybody likes workouts, so probably a couple that I may have done with Arianna in the past here.
I'm gonna screenshot this.
Let me move us. There we go. I'll move us. All right. Yes, Brent, I can send them to you.
I got it.
So this was like a power workout that I would do. Again, you've got your warm-ups and your presets and things like that. This is really just the main set I've taken a snapshot of. So we would get in and we would use the power racks that Arianna would talk about. If you don't have a power rack, you just use some sort of light resistance or some sort of resistance that is going to hold you back in the water. So sometimes we would use T-shirts. Sometimes we would use drag suits. Sometimes we'd use buckets. Sometimes we'd use power racks with the weights. So there's all different ways that you can use some resistance. So here I had a little workout where it's like a light resistance, and then you use a stretch cord for assistance, an assisted cord. And then you get up and you do a 25, and I put front end speed here, which means the first 25 of your 100. How fast do you want to go in the first 25 of your 100? And then in the second round, you increase the weight a little bit, maybe add some fins or some paddles for some assistance there. And then you've got your cord, and then you've got another dive 25 front end speed. And then right at the end, we really increase the resistance a lot. And then we do a couple of really fast 15s at 50 pace. So it's a little bit faster than you would be swimming your 100. It's more of a top end speed. So that's what the TES means, top end speed there. FES means front end speed. That would be the first 50 of your 100 speed. And then BES means back end speed. That is the second 50 of your 100. So that's kind of just some terminology that I would use. Let me go back to this and go on to the next one. Okay. I always like to, Brent, in my workouts, I always like to get faster. And I always like to do the fastest swims at the end of the main set. So I like to kind of build, and I also like to add equipment as I go. So I noticed in one of your workouts, Brent, you had the equipment up front and then you took equipment off.
Yeah.
I was always of the mindset of start at a certain pace and get faster and faster. And I always like to have my swimmers walk away feeling like they did their best work at the end. It's just mainly a mental thing that I always like to leave them with. Everybody's different, so there's no right or wrong way to do anything.
Yeah, that's why I said like to like kind of like have fun with it, because like we definitely do it in different orders as well.
Yeah.
But one thing that's cool about doing the equipment first is like, because as you're taking equipment off and your time's getting slower, it's like mentally you also like are thinking, well, I want to try to keep myself at those times, so it's almost like pushing you to go further, or sorry, to go faster. So, but like you're absolutely right, and just mix it up and figure out what works. But I think variety is probably the biggest key.
Yeah, exactly. So here, you've got some hundreds where you're kind of smooth and strong, breathing every 6. You go down to the second round, you're doing some 75s, or a little bit stronger than the hundreds were, breathing every 6. And then at the end, you're doing some really fast 50s, breathing every 8. But you've got some fins and paddles on there. So again, just different ways to mix up your workouts. And I got one more here. This is actually one of my favorite kind of sets that I would do for Arianna's 100, where we would do, try and build her 100. So we'd start with some blasting the legs, kind of burn the lactate in the legs a little bit, then 65 easy. Then we'd get up on the blocks and we would dive at 25. And I would give her specific times that I want her to hit. So for Arianna, I might say, hey, on these 25s, I want you to be 11.5, or between 11.5 and 11.7. So I'd give her kind of 2/10 that she needs to hit within that range. So it would, if she was swimming 12 seconds, I'd either tell her to like pick it up, or I'd ask her what's wrong, because she's not hitting the paces that I want her to hit. So either she's had a really hard workout, the day before and she's still fatigued, or we try and figure it out. But if I give her specific times to hit here, then I've got an understanding of what I want. She knows what I want, very clear picture. And then again, we're hitting the paces that we need to hit. And then she would push a back end 50, again, hitting a certain time that I'd want her to come back in her 100 in. So, and just like Brent said earlier, we do somewhere between 4 and 6 rounds, depending on, how much we could get through. So they're just some examples of some workouts. You can play with all those things, but I think playing with the different speeds within a workout is really good. Playing with your front end speed, playing with your back end speed, those things are really going to help you become a faster 100 freestyler in the end. And I know, yep.
And something on that last set, like I can feel the bile raising in my throat because I remember how hard it was. But what's really important on those is like you do the 20 or the 35 fast kick, but that second end when you're kicking easy or swimming easy, it's still not easy. You're still doing it with intention of having a good stroke. You're not flopping up and down the pool. So like while it's easy, it's not stop and you're not recovering really. It's like an active recovery, which is a joke of a word because I hate it. But it's your heart rate's still pretty high. You're trying to reduce your heart rate while still moving. So that's how you kind of get better at the 100 freestyle. If you're able to let your heart rate drop and still continue to swim fast, that's when it's important, and still focus on the details that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's actually that's a great point. Like, because it's kind of going back to where I mentioned, like at the very beginning, we talk about how like every turn is an opportunity kind of thing. Like when you're doing that easy swimming between rounds. One thing, like I'll admit, like I don't do this every single time because sometimes you're like, oh, whatever, I'm just way too tired right now. But those are probably the times when I should get even better at it. Use those as opportunities to swim with as perfect technique as possible. Because like you're swimming easy, right? How hard is it to actually just be like, you know what, I'm going to train my muscle memory, or I'm going to imprint this perfect technique into my muscle memory so that no matter how tired I get, eventually when you get to the race, you've only got one technique imprinted in your muscle fibers, right? So that's no matter what, that's the technique that you fall back on.
Right, because when you get tired in a race, the technique you're going to fall back on is the worst, sloppiest stroke that you have in your brain. So the more that you practice perfect technique, that's what you're going to fall back on. So your stroke isn't going to fall apart.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, a lot of good information. We've gone over the hour. I promised you guys we'd try and stick to an hour. So we've obviously gone through a lot of really.
We're in quarantine, man. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, we're good. All right, we'll try and answer. We'll answer one question each. Okay, so if I've put the chat back on. So if you guys have some questions for Brent, Arianna, or myself, feel free to ask right now. We'll stay on for another 5 or so minutes and answer a few questions. And how can I improve my third 25, Arianna?
Ooh, I mean, that's probably the hardest short course 25 to improve, because that's really like the mental drudgery of that short course race, because the last 25, you have the energy, you're like, okay, I'm almost there. So that third 25 is what we were talking about earlier. It's when you're getting into practice, making sure that you're really pushing those, when your coach gives you a set where it's like, you want to do repetitive hundreds or 50s or 200s, making sure that you're focusing on that 25, because once you get into the race, you'll know that you have the strength to have that 25. I think the first 50, like you were saying, Brent, earlier, it's like that, it's kind of, or not the first 50, the first 25 is like that easy speed. You get off the block, you get that first 25. The second 25 is pretty easy speed still. You've gotten off that wall, you have a ton of energy. And then that third 25 is when it all hits you. So I think the third 25 is the most mental of the race. That's when you really have to like put that effort in to be strong, making sure you're breathing properly, you're not getting sloppy, you're keeping your technique together, getting to that third turn to get off and finish that race.
Yeah, and I think it's a little different too, like mentally speaking, when you're comparing the third 25 from a long course 100 versus, a short course 100, because in the short course, like your 25s are separated by turns. So like I would say it's even harder doing a short course one, because you're still thinking like, okay, well, this is the third length. It's not just the 50 to 75 meters, because I got this turn that I still have to do, and this other underwater breakout that I still, like, you still got to do all that. Whereas in, in a 50-meter pool, like, it's mentally, it's just like, okay, this is you're on your last length already, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to break through that, I think, that middle 25 mentally long course than it is short course, just because you don't have that wall that's dividing it. It's like you're already on your last length. So if I could ever do a 100-meter freestyle in a 100-meter pool, oh man, just one length.
Yeah.
Oh, I would be in heaven.
That sounds like my nightmare.
Sounds like death. Yeah.
I would love it.
It's horrible.
No, thanks.
No, I don't either. All right, well, let's answer one last question here. I saw somewhere about bilateral breathing, Brent, in the 100 freestyle.
Yeah.
Do you breathe both sides or just one?
I breathe bilaterally, so I breathe to one side, but the side that I breathe to changes each length.
Okay, so you go which side to which side?
So in the London final, I was in lane 7. So I was breathing to my left, because that's where the fastest fish were. Right. I want to make sure that during that breath, I was breathing to the side that was going to push me faster. Right. And then coming back, I still wanted to be breathing with my eyes on that competition. Right. So I was able to change sides doing that. So I don't have a favorite side to breathe on. And that goes back to training. Like, even in training, I'll do bilateral breathing. Unilateral. Wait, I messed up. Yeah, unilateral breathing. So I totally screwed that up earlier when I said I breathe bilaterally. Like, I breathe to one side, but I switch sides every length. There. I screwed that up less. So making sure that in training, like, I'll still breathe to one side, but every single flip turn, I'll breathe to the opposite side. So if I breathe looking at one side of the pool, I'll come back looking at that same side of the pool. So that's how I still train both sides of my body, so I don't get stronger or imbalanced towards one side.
Okay, cool. All right, well, listen, I appreciate you guys' time. I know it's valuable, and all the information you've given. Thanks for taking the time to put some slides together for everybody. You guys are awesome, and hopefully we can all get back in the water soon. I know we're all missing it to some degree. So stay strong, stay healthy, stay motivated out there, everybody, because we are going to get back to some work in the pool very, very shortly. And we're looking forward to doing some more clinics on the road as well very shortly. So, Arianna, Brent, thank you for your time. Take care, okay?
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
All right, bye-bye.